People underestimate the power of a story. And so in this video, I am going to show you why the stories you tell yourself are so powerful, why they don't just live in your mind, but in your body, and how to rewrite them so they start working for you instead of against you. Because you will never outperform the story that you've been telling yourself about who you are. And whether those stories are adopted stories, they've come from somewhere outside of you, or maybe they're the ones that you've scripted yourself. Either way, if you change your story, you change your life. And I'm going to show you why. Hi, I'm Jody Jackson, a neuroconditioning specialist who uses neuroscience to train your brain for high performance so you can rewire reality for the results you most want. So why are stories so powerful? It's because we are story-based creatures. In the best-selling book Sapiens, it shows that the entire reason that humans dominate this planet over species that are physically stronger, that are faster, and that have a far higher population is because we are the only animal that can share and believe in the stories that we tell each other. And not only that, we are, as a species, addicted to stories. There's another book, The Storytelling Animal, and it highlights that even when the body goes to sleep, the mind stays up all night telling itself stories. And these stories that we tell affect the future that we create. Stories don't just reflect reality, they participate with it. They actively shape and they influence reality. So let me give you an example. In The Psychology of Money, and it's a great book by Morgan Housel, he talks about how stories are the most powerful force in the economy. So he explains in his book the collapse of the Lehman Brothers. But before Lehman Brothers collapsed, confidence, not cash, was the first thing to disappear. So you had headlines telling stories of toxic assets, systemic collapse, banks folding, and it caused people to pull their money out of the banks and for banks to fold. Now I know that's a simple version of it, but essentially the story of crisis created the crisis that the story was describing, right? Stories become self-fulfilling. And we experienced this in the UK just a few years ago. Does anyone here remember the petrol crisis? The only crisis was telling us that we had one. Even petrol stations that had perfectly normal stock were emptied within hours. And yes, there had been light disruptions to deliveries, but they weren't empty because of supply problems. They were empty because of demand problems. It suddenly went through the roof. People were panic buying. They were filling jerry cans. You had queues stretched around the block. And what did the media do? They doubled down. They put more images of empty forecourts. They put more videos of long queues, and they became the new headlines, which triggered more panic buying, which emptied more stations. And it was a matter of days before a manageable logistics problem had become a genuine national fuel crisis. The story of shortage created the shortage. Right? The same thing happened with toilet paper and pasta during COVID. And this one was just absurd because there was no shortage of either. Production and deliveries never stopped. But because the media showed pictures of empty shelves, the same panic created the same problem. The stories that we tell become the future we create. And it works in the other direction too. We can tell stories that shape reality to bend for the better. Think about someone like Martin Luther King, right? I Have a Dream. He told a story of what reality could look like, even though that story did not reflect the current reality. He told a story of a country that didn't yet exist. And that story bent the arc of reality towards it because it focused minds. It attracted resources. Laws changed. Behavior changed. The story came first and reality followed. And it is not mystical, it's mechanical, because the thing that stories create is belief. And belief is one of the most powerful invisible forces in your life. Beliefs are the things that write stories into reality. Let me tell you one of the best examples of this. So in Lisa Rankin's book, Mind Over Medicine, she spoke about a man called Mr. Right, and he was lying in his hospital bed with advanced terminal cancer. And then he's accepted onto a trial for an experimental new drug. And his doctor sits beside him and he tells him, this could save your life. And Mr. Right believes him. And within days of starting the treatment, his tumors began to shrink. And then afterwards, a report is published. The drug doesn't work. The trial has failed. It's been proven ineffective. And somebody tells Mr. Right that story. And they said you could almost watch the moment the story changes inside of him. His belief collapses and reality follows. And so his doctor, watching this, decides to try something. Now, you definitely could not do this now, but what he does is he calls Mr. Right back. He sits beside the bed and he tells him a new story. There's a new treatment available, an improved formula, more advanced than the last one. This one works. And Mr. Right buys into that story. But what he actually injects him with is water. And even so, within a few days, the tumors are gone again. The only thing that changed was the story that Mr. Right believed, not the treatment, the story. So I want to ask you, if stories can collapse banks, empty petrol stations, and stories can shape civilization and transform your health, just imagine the power of the stories you tell yourself in your life. And imagine what they're doing to your results, to your confidence, to your relationships, and your potential. I help people rewrite their story at my Rewire reality retreat. And if you want to see what goes on inside the room, I've dropped a link in the description. And here is the neuroscience of why stories shape reality. So every time you repeat a story to yourself about who you are, about what you can handle, about what is possible for you, you're strengthening a neural pathway. And all that means is whatever it is that you rehearse mentally, it becomes automatic. And the more automatic, the more authentic it feels, right? It's just who we think we are. But I tell this to all of my clients, automatic does not mean authentic. All it means is you've practiced it more, right? It's a conditioning issue rather than a character issue. And so it can be reconditioned so that your new story, one that serves you better, becomes natural to you, becomes who you are. And what happens when your story becomes deeply wired? It begins to filter your reality. Your brain is presented with around 11 million bits of data per second, but you are only consciously aware of about 40. So your brain filters out more than it filters in. And what it filters in is based on the stories you believe. If your story is, you're not good with money, your brain will filter reality to be able to show you the evidence of why. If your story is, I always find a way, your brain will show you all of the evidence and the opportunities that align with that story. So that is why stories are so powerful. They affect some of the deepest parts of our brain and then they filter reality through it. And that filter decides what you notice and what you ignore. And the stories you tell pull other people's behavior in orbit around them. And when you do that at scale, they create the realities they describe. Stories are not describing your life, they are directing it. And this is not just happening in your mind. Stories also live in your body. So if you go back to Mr. Right, a story moved through that man's body, it changed his cells. And that is not a metaphor. That is cellular biology responding to belief. Your body is taking instructions from the story constantly, whether you are aware of it or not. There is a best-selling book, The Body Keeps the Score, and it talks about exactly this. Experience and belief, they don't just live in your memory, they live in your tissue, in your posture, in your nervous system, in the way that your body braces when something old gets activated. And this is why mindset alone doesn't shift this. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because if you want to rewrite the story, you need to know where the story actually lives, right? It lives in your brain and your body. So how do you rewrite the stories of your life so they work for you? First, you decide what it is you want. What is the story that you want? If you had a pen and a piece of paper, what would you want to write as the next chapter? You see, so often people relive their old stories because they haven't actually crystallized what it is that they want. See, here's what most people do with stories. Most people write stories based on what they don't want. They tell a story of things they're fed up with, they're finished with, they don't want anymore in their life. And this is a kind of push energy, right? You are pushing from your past. You're moving away from something you don't want anymore. And they're using those stories rather than pull energy, right? Pull energy is when you actually decide what it is you want. You put it out in front of you so that you can see it, right? You decide what it is that you're moving towards, not away from. It creates a completely different energy when you're going after your goals, right? This is about scripting what it is that we actually want. And this is why vision boards are so powerful. It is like a visual script for what it is that you want, and you put it out in front of you so you can see it, and then speak it out loud, right? This is not woo. I remember when I wanted to start speaking professionally on stages, and one of the first stages that I wanted to be on to establish my credibility was a TED stage. And this crystallized desire, it started to filter through the conversations I was having. It started to affect who I began to follow on social media, the books I read. All of it was pointing towards that goal. And when they were doing a speaker search, because of all of that, I was made aware of it. It came into my orbit and I got selected. You see, when you set the goal, it starts to filter what you notice, and it influences the action you take to be able to stack the odds of success in your favor to make it more likely, right? So I got the gig, but I was scared of speaking on stage. I still didn't feel like a speaker. And this is where most people fail, because they try to rewrite the story in their mind and forget that the story is also in their body. The new story, I'm a speaker, has to be installed where the old one was stored. So I reconditioned. And I do this with my clients now. I reconditioned how I felt about speaking on stage through a combination of techniques like visualization, nervous system regulation, and exposure therapy, so that I felt great when I did it. Because when you feel good going after your new story, it helps you stay in it rather than sabotage you back to your old one. This is so much deeper than fake it till you make it strategy. This is a kind of rehearse it until you become it and condition it into your nervous system so deeply that your future story feels so familiar that it becomes like a memory, right? Michael Phelps said he visualized winning so often that when he did, it felt like deja vu. So you rehearse it mentally in your mind. You decide what it is that you want. You associate yourself with what it would feel like to have it. And every time you take action or you see evidence for your new story coming to life, acknowledge it, journal it. This is giving your brain evidence to keep trusting the new story. The story you tell yourself about who you are. And bear in mind, stories are language and pictures, right? Visual or verbal. But the stories you tell yourself about who you are, it's not a description, it is an instruction. Your brain is listening, your body is listening, the people around you are listening, and all of them are arranging themselves around the version that you have been broadcasting. And whatever story that currently is, you're not stuck with it. The brain is capable of changing well into old age, right? The body can recalibrate, the pathways can be rewired. So bring your old story to the surface and write one that you want, embody it, find evidence for it, and take action towards it. This is how you stop running on a story that you didn't choose and start living a story that you did. And if you want to train this with me, there's a link in the description.